Okay, so we are inching ever closer to physically placing the trade, but before we do that, we need to create ourselves a trading plan or a trading idea of how we want to trade certain economic news events. So we want to get ourselves into a bit of a routine, but before we do that, we want to always know what we will trade, how we will trade it, and when we will trade it well in advance of us actually trading it, because this will make us proactive and make the physical execution of the trade the easy bit. That's just clicking the button. Before we click the button, however, we need to know exactly how we plan to trade an economic news event, what currency pairs we're going to trade, what direction we're going to trade them in, etc., etc. So the best way to do this is to get yourself into a weekly routine. So the weekly routine is as follows. Now, this looks like a lot of work, but it's actually not. Your weekly routine is roughly 15-20 minutes, your daily routine, 15-20 minutes, your hourly routine, 15-20 minutes, and your execution routine, 15-20 minutes. So it's really not that much of a commitment of time. And essentially, you are very, very time efficient as a news-based trader. Why is that? Well, you know when you need to be at your charts, i.e. when certain news announcements are taking place. The rest of the time, you can go off and do whatever you want to do. You are only at your charts for the times where you believe there will be a trading opportunity, and that's always around a scheduled news event. So let's go through this routine. So on a weekly basis, we will use forexfactory.com to get a high-level summary of what news is coming out for the week ahead, when it's coming out, and most specifically, what currencies will be affected. And from that point, we can start to get a fair idea of which ones would be ideal to trade. Main reason for that is, remember, we'll have a big picture perspective. We'll know what currencies are strong and weak. So we'll then look to trade that strength or weakness with the economic news coming out for the week ahead that affects those specific currencies. On a daily basis, you'll obviously be coming into the day that you'll be trading that news event, and you're going to prepare for that news event in your trading time zone. So check what time the news is coming out, what currency it will affect, and check what happened in the last trading time zone. So for example, if you're trading the European news that comes out in the European session, you will refer back to the Asian session. What happened in the Asian session? Because that could give you some very, very powerful clues as to what currency pairs you should be trading. For example, if you come to your charts at 7 a.m. London time, getting ready for the European session, if you check the Asian session, what happened overnight, and you found that Australian dollar was very, very weak because there was bad data out of Australia, immediately that gives you a weak currency pair for the European session. So then, for example, if you get some good pound data in the European session, you can immediately put pound against the Australian dollar for a buy trade. Strong pound, weak Australian dollar, pound Oz to the upside. So that's why it's important to always check the previous trading time zone to the one that you are in, because that can give you some very powerful clues as to what could be weak, what could be strong, and that is then built into your trading plan in terms of the currency pair you want to select. Then as we get closer to the news event, from an hourly perspective, roughly 20 minutes before the news, get prepared, because there's still a little bit of work that you need to do. You just want to get your charts ready with the currency pair that you're planning to trade. Have your squawk turned on and your news gun visible, because remember, we want to hear the news as quickly as possible and we want to execute the trade as quickly as possible. In the last section, we obviously looked at how you set yourself up as a professional trader. Give yourself a little bit of time to do that. The last thing you want to be doing is preparing for a news event 5 minutes before and you haven't got any of your resources prepared. So give yourself at least 20 minutes to prepare yourself and get yourself set up, because you want to have at least 5 to 10 minutes where you can just sit and wait and literally have your finger on the button ready to pull the trigger if your trade plan comes together. And then finally is the execution. As soon as the news comes out, you will know straight away whether to take the trade or not and in what direction. Simply execute the trade as timely as possible. So using the example that I mentioned earlier with pound Oz, I'm going to go through that in a bit more detail. So we had weak Australian data overnight. Coming into the European session, we had good pound data. So we would look to buy pound Oz as soon as the good UK data came out. Now, if that UK data wasn't good, would we have taken the trade? No, because we'd have had weak Australian data and we'd have had weak pound data. So we'd have had weak against weak. We never trade when the two currency pairs are exactly the same. We want to get diverse opposites. Okay, so just looking at this from a more specific individual perspective, the weekly routine. So we'll look at our Forex factory from a high level perspective and start to identify the high impact news events that we need to really be monitoring and trading. And from a daily perspective, we can zoom in and have a more specific view as to what's coming out for that day. Remember, we always check what happened in the last trading time zone. So this calendar is set to GMT, so I'd have been trading the European session. So for example, on Friday, I was coming to my charts at around about 7 o'clock in the morning for the 9:30 news. The first thing I do is check what happened previously, and I can see there that at 2:30 in the Asian session, the retail sales from Australia were very bad. So immediately I'm checking what's happened before to give me a clue as to what would be a standout currency pair. In regards to the hourly routine, 20 minutes before, you want to get yourself well prepared. So get your setup ready. So as we can see here, you've got your charts, you've got your Forex news gun on top of your charts, and you've got your squawk in the background, which is the audio at the same time, because we don't know which one, whether the news gun or the squawk will provide us with the news quicker. So we have both, and then whatever provides us with that news first, we will act upon. And then as soon as that news comes out, so we'll have our audio on, we'll have our news gun, we'll be monitoring both. As soon as that news hits the wires and comes out, we will then decide within a fraction of a second whether that news supports the trade that we're taking or works against it. So if we're looking for good data to buy a certain currency, we would look to confirm that strong data with a positive number, and vice versa in the other way. So let me bring it all together using an example. So trading pound Aussie long, or a buy trade, on the 3rd of July 2015. So weekly routine. When I was looking at my weekly routine, I noticed that Friday could be quite interesting. Why could Friday be quite interesting? Well, we had Australian data and we had pound data. Now remember, we looked at our bigger picture perspective. We were bearish on the Aussie because of them cutting interest rates and their central bank moving to a negative stance. And we were positive on the pound because of their central bank, albeit slowly, moving towards a rate hike and being bullish on the UK economy. So immediately I was saying to myself, potentially we could get weakness on the Aussie and strength on the pound. That would be two complete opposites, and that would give me the opportunity to trade pound Aus, which is a currency pair, utilizing the strength of the pound and the weakness of the Australian dollar. Now, I don't trade it just like that. I obviously just plan ahead. That's my thought process, where I'm saying to myself, yeah, I'd like to trade pound Aus if, and this is the key thing, if the pound data comes in good and the Australian data comes in bad, because that would add and support the bigger picture understanding. So that was on my agenda for Friday. Didn't mean there was a guaranteed trade on Friday, but it was on my agenda for Friday. So I was planning in advance in terms of what I wanted to see happen before I trade it. If Australian data came in good and was positive, I wouldn't trade it. And if the pound data came in negative, I wouldn't trade it, because that goes against the bigger picture. Okay, so then I came to my charts on Friday. As I mentioned earlier, the European session, so I come to my charts, and I got to my charts around about 9 o'clock, preparing myself for the 9:30 news, as we can see here, affecting the pound. Part one of my plan came together. So I wanted to see weak retail sales from Australia. Why? Because that would support the bigger picture from Australia. So the Central Bank of Australia, the RBA, is bearish on the Australian dollar. Bad data keeps the Australian dollar weak. So coming into the European session, we had a very weak Australian dollar. So I'm immediately saying to myself, what can I pair it against? Well, I only want to pair it against a strong currency. So I then looked at the bigger picture. The pound is generally strong because of the central bank slowly moving towards a rate hike and the economy doing quite well. So if we got good UK data out at 9:30, that would give me the ability to execute a trade on pound Aussie, utilizing the trading plan of a strong pound, good data, versus a weak Australian dollar off bad data, in combination with the bigger picture also supporting that idea. So then it came to the hourly around about 9:10 London time. I got myself prepared for the 9:30 news, knowing exactly what I needed to see before executing an instant buy trade on pound Aussie, i.e. better than expected data. So here was my trading setup. I had my news gun, I had my squawk, and I had my chart on pound Aussie, and I was simply waiting for the 9:30 news. And then when the 9:30 news came, it was all about getting into that trade as efficiently as possible. As you can see here, this is the chart of the pound Aussie on the 5-minute time frame at the point of the news release. When that news came out, and it was good for the pound, as we can see on the previous slide. So if we just go back a couple of slides, as you can see, it did come out at 58.5 versus an expected 57.4. It came out much better than expected. So we had strong, fresh information from the UK to support the pound. We had bad, weak data from Australia overnight. This supported a pound Aussie long because remember, thinking about currencies in pairs, the pound is the base, the Australian dollar is the terms, the pound is getting stronger than the Australian dollar. So that only means one thing, the chart should rise. That's why we buy pound Oz. And this move lasted for several hours, generating a pip movement of around about 140 pips. And I believe that it carried on going over the course of the next week or so. However, do we need to take the whole ride? Not necessarily. As a news trader, it's good to get in and get out, generate our profits from those initial fresh information data points, and then look for opportunities at the next opportunity. Okay, so what we want to do is apply this approach every single time. Build your trading plan ahead of time so you have an idea of how you want to trade certain news items. Identify those news items which have the potential to move the market. Know exactly what you need to have happen with the data for you to trade it. So, i.e. good pound data, bad Australian data. And when you get that, you can pair strong against weak or vice versa and do that every single time. If the news does as you expect, i.e. it comes in better as you wanted, you can execute the trade in a timely manner, using your resources to give you the most efficient, effective entry into the market. Now, if the news does not do as you expect, you simply walk away from that potential opportunity and you look for another one. Okay, so just to summarize, do not underestimate this routine. By doing a little bit of work each week up front and following your routine, you will get very tuned into the market. You will know exactly what currencies are strong, what are weak at any given time, and that will give you the ability to plan those trades where you pair strong against weak. And this will help massively in you being able to select those currency pairs which have the optimum potential for a decent one-directional move. And it'll increase your profitability of success tenfold. You'll notice in all of the trade videos that I've put that I follow that process every single time. And the more you do it, the better you'll become. So actually go away and watch some of those trade videos, the live trade examples, and see the process that I follow every single time. And the more you do it, it will just become absolute second nature. Every single week, you'll start to pinpoint those trading events where they have the potential to give you those really high probability opportunities. And when you do this, you will then start to realize the profit potential from each and every single one of them.